True story, I was at work the other day, and I made a comment, and I realized my comment was a dated comment. And so I had to give an explanation to my comment so they understood the context of what I was trying to say. And when I said that, I realized that it came from the 90s era. And when I said that, one of the girls kind of giggled, and she was like, well, I was born in 95. And I was like, okay, and then the other girl that she was training, she's like, well, that's awkward because my mom's only 38. And I was like, oh my word, I'm older than your mom. It's just like, what is happening, But we are wrapping up 2025. But one of the things that, I think historically we have a tendency to do is we have a tendency to, okay, 2025 is almost over. Let's just go as hard as we can, and then 2026 will be here, and then we can start anew, right? No. And so tonight we're going to talk a little bit very specifically about the faithfulness of God. And we're going to reflect on that. We've got some people lined up, family members lined up tonight that are going to come and share a little bit about the faithfulness of God. And a scripture that has been in my heart for some time now, and I just want to turn your attention to it for a few moments. As pastors, we have to take a few moments. It's just like Keith getting up here to do offering. He had to take a few moments. It's just the pastor in him. I understand it 1,000%. But as we reflect on 2025, let me just remind you of a couple key things here. Our mission and our vision as a church, when God birthed this in our hearts, it wasn't to just be yet another church. Because if you look at statistics in America today, the church is in decline. We plant new churches every year, and yet more churches close than new churches open. It is a significant issue and a problem. And so one of the things that we've been wrestling with is, God, we don't want to just be another church. God, we want to be the church that you've called us to be. We want to be the church that Monmouth and Independence and the surrounding areas, that Oregon, that the world, we want to be that church, God. Whatever you have called us to be, that's what we want to be. And we believe that we're going to do that by being daily devoted followers of Jesus. We believe that we're going to throw off the ideas that I just go to church on Sunday and live out this dream that I serve Jesus every day, right? That's the call of God, right? And we also believe passionately, church, that we're called to journey with others. That we are called by God to find ways to get involved with our neighbors and our coworkers and our classmates and our families, and we're called to journey with them so that we can show them the love and the truth of Jesus Christ. But church, these are just a couple reflections I'm thinking about here as we look past this last 5 years together. And in Lamentations 3, we read about the hardship that God's people experienced after the fall of Jerusalem. Now, I realize when we look back in time, it could mean struggle. It could mean blessing. It could mean something in between. But the reality is that God is always faithful regardless of what we're going through. But what's interesting is Lamentations 3, Jerusalem had fallen. And with the fall of Jerusalem, the walls had been torn down. The houses and the structures had been torn down. Even the temple of God had been torn down. Now think about this for a moment. That may not mean as much to you and me today, but understand that had so much to do with their sacrificial system. So much to do with their place of worship and honoring of God. And they had no way of doing any of those things. And yet, in light of these horrific events, the writer of Lamentations chapter 3 writes this in verse 21. But this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. The Lord is my portion, says my soul. Therefore, I will hope in him. Isn't that powerful to think about tonight? It just amazes me. And I hope that you're encouraged in thinking back and reflecting on 2025, thinking about, wow, the things that maybe you've had to walk through in your job, maybe the things that you've had to walk through together in a marriage, or the things that you've had to walk through together in a family, or the failures in different areas of your life. Whatever it is, I hope you understand and can see that God's faithfulness remains regardless. So just for a quick thought with you here this evening, success or failure? Success or failure? Faithfulness is defined through God's unending, steadfast love and abundant new mercies each morning, contrasting human unreliability with his consistent character, providing hope amidst suffering and highlighting his trustworthiness to fulfill his promises despite devastating circumstances. It's about God being a constant, reliable source of compassion and loyalty, even when people fail. Success or failure. You know, I was praying about this, and the Lord brought something very distinct to mind. So forgive me for my construction analogy this evening, but let me just share this with you for a moment. You young people, hopefully you can grab onto this idea as well. But you know that for many of you, you understand that I was a construction remodeler for a number of years, and one of the things that we would do from time to time is custom tile showers. Well, when you make a shower, what's your number one enemy? It's water, right? You want everything to be waterproof, completely and utterly waterproof. So we would tear a shower down to bare bones, and then we'd build it back up. We'd put a shower pan and a drain, and then we would seal everything. In fact, there was this substance called Red Guard, and I'm quite certain that has affected my cognitive function as of today, because when you breathe this stuff, I promise you it is killing you from the inside out. And when you put it on something, it makes it completely, water can't get through. It's impenetrable. It's amazing stuff. Well, I did something that I thought I was doing it right. Well, a curb is a shower's best friend. You know what I'm talking about, the curb? It's the thing that you have to step over. It's the thing that when we get older, we don't want anymore. We just want the water. But the reason they put curbs in the shower is because that enables water to stay in the shower. Well, I took a 2x4 and I framed in my curb. Then I wrapped it with waterproof material. Then I red guarded it. Then I tiled it and sealed it. Well, what I didn't take into account is that over the next year, the moisture content of that 2x4 evaporated. Do you know what happens to wood when it evaporates? It shrinks. Well, the shrinking of that 2x4, changing its size and structure, and the weight of people going in and out of the shower, guess what happened to the tile? It cracked. Man, you guys are smart. It cracked, right? And so, you know, at first I was horrified. They called me about a year later, and they said, Stephen, we love everything you've done, but this shower is leaking. It's a problem. So I go on site, and I get a humidifier in there and fans in there because Tim taught me all that stuff because he was in restoration. And long story short, I had to tear all the tile back. I had to remove that 2x4 that was now saturated with water, and I had to let everything dry out for several days. And long story short, I had to use a different material that would not be affected by water or moisture or air. And long story short, it was the failure of the situation that taught me how to be successful. And the reason I share that with you tonight is I want you to hear, when you look back over 2025, God's faithfulness is not dependent upon our success or failure, but so often God allows us to fail so he can teach us how to really succeed. Did you catch that tonight? So success or failure does not affect God's faithfulness. And Psalms 89:1 says, I will sing of the steadfast love of the Lord forever. With my mouth I will make known your faithfulness to all generations. Now, can I be honest with you and say, when I discovered that this shower was leaking, was I singing the faithfulness of God? Probably not, right? But I think it's time for us to learn as a church and as a body and as a community that we have got to learn that through success or failure, God's faithfulness remains the same. And my final portion of this thought here as we get ready for some testimonies is failure is not a limitation for God. Failure is not a limitation for God. Mercy, okay, is defined as God's inexhaustible, nurturing compassion, like a mother's love from the womb, which is constantly renewed each morning, preventing total consumption despite judgment, and demonstrating his unchanging faithfulness and kindness even in deep suffering. It's mercy as withholding deserved punishment, a fresh supply for each new day, and the foundation for hope amid devastation. Isn't that awesome? I love that thought about mercy. So when we fail, God is there to pick us back up. So the reason I brought this up for just a moment, failure is not a limitation to God. Well, I've got probably a number of stories of failure. In fact, I could spend the evening tell you stories of failure. But the reason I want to tell you a story of failure is because through that failure, we have witnessed God's mercy and his faithfulness time and again. And church, so often in our world today, what we do is that when there's failure, we think, oh, it's over. My marriage is over. My family is over. My job is over. Oh, this church is over. What God promised, what God said he was going to do, it's over. Because we're only looking at the situation through our finite mind and our finite eyes and our finite understanding. When the reality is your limitation and mine, your failure and mine does not limit God. In fact, he works right through those circumstances. And this is something else that is incredibly important for us to know. And I promise I'm just going to share one more story. We'll wrap this up and get some testimonies going here this evening. But it was a fresh perspective. I haven't even had a chance to share it with my wife yet, so I'm kind of excited to share it for the first time. But back in 2018, and I've talked about stuff like this before, so you've heard parts of it. But in 2018, my wife and I took a bold step of faith. We were serving down in Albany, and we were serving a local church faithfully and having a really fun time, great season of life. And we felt a stirring in our hearts to step out in faith to plant a church. And so with that in mind, we started doing all the right things that we knew how to do. And in about 6 months' time, we had resigned our position. And we were sent up into, was it Seattle? Is that where we went? Yeah, up into Seattle. And we attended a conference, right? Because a conference for 3 days is going to prepare you to plant a church, okay? I'm just telling you right now. If you attended the conference, you're ready to go, man. You are ready to go. And then long story short, after that, we came back and we started laying tracks and vision for what that church was going to be. And in early 2019, we launched. And we started meeting, we met at another church campus. And then long story short, we started meeting at an elementary school. And we were doing it. We were doing all the things. Well, late 2019, everything came to a crashing halt. And for the longest time, I have worn that failure as something so personal. And the hurt and the process we went through was, I don't have time, that's not the point of my story. But the reason I bring it up is because God brought us through something. We failed yet again, and it was his mercy. And it was his faithfulness that reminded us that our failure didn't limit his plans for us. And so then fast forward from 2019, and we roll right into COVID. In March of COVID, we're launching Community Life Church in our front room. And the rest is history. But the point I wanted to bring that up and to speak to God's faithfulness is so often when we're going through something that's so hard and so painful, God uses those situations to train, prepare, and to develop us. And his faithfulness is there amidst that. Isaiah 63:7 says this, I will recount the steadfast love of the Lord, the praises of the Lord, according to all that the Lord has granted us, and the great goodness to the house of Israel, that he has granted them according to his compassion, according to the abundance of his steadfast love. See, church, we have the opportunity to share of his faithfulness, of his love, and of his mercies, regardless of the failures that we walk through, regardless of the successes that we have. At the end of the day, through it all, he is faithful and he is true. Amen? So I'm going to invite Keith and Pam here to come and to join us up here.
My wife is playing shy tonight, so you've got me again. Yeah, more. No, please. No. Thank you, Pastor. I just want to share briefly, financially, a great testimony of what God has done. The past few years, a couple years, I was in retirement and not working, but I began to flip, with some help, flip some mobile homes, and the Lord was helping me to make a little money when I would buy one, fix it up, and sell it. And so last year or two, or a couple years ago, I did that over and over again, but then all of a sudden they didn't sell. So I had two of them that did not sell, so I had to pay these space rent for that, expenses for that, contractors, and then a second one simultaneously because I bought the second one thinking that first one's going to sell. Then plus I had my own house payment. So I'm trying to supply 3 payments, mortgage payments, 3 payments on, I just had my retirement. My wife was working, making good money, so she was helping me. But 3 payments drained our entire savings, just drained everything really quickly. And then I didn't have enough money to pay some contractors, that money I owed those guys. And then helping Pam's mom out with some of her stuff and another contractor that we had covered for her. Anyway, it took us, so our answer was to get one home that belonged to my mother-in-law to get it refinanced so we could pay all these bills off and to pay us back so we could pay our contractors. Long story, we tried 4 different times, 4 different ways with 4 different finance companies to get refinanced. That's because you had terrible credit. No, our credit was really good, but my wife's mom was 93 years of age, and they thought that deep behind the scenes that we're taking advantage of my mother-in-law, elder abuse. No one would say that publicly, but that we found out later, that's one of the issues. Properties were in trust, so that was a complicated issue. Anyway, we had all these variables. We tried for 11 months to get refinancing. It was so difficult. Meanwhile, we're going broke. We're drained. We didn't have money for nothing. And prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. And we questioned God the whole time. God, what are you doing? What's happening to us? Where are we going wrong? All these kind of questions. But a friend of a friend from our church, who's a pastor in California, Pam says, call this lady up. I called her up. Well, I'll help you. If I can't help you, I got a friend who can. Bottom line, they came through, were able to get the house refinanced and paid quickly, paid contractors off. We got reimbursed for money that we were out of. And it's like, God was so faithful in that. It took 11 months. And we were questioning God, but we learned so much that my wife and I talked about this afternoon. It helps us to learn a lot of self-discipline. Learn to budget. Self-discipline. Stop spending. Right? Stop spending so we could save money for ourselves. No, stop spending so we could pay bills off, pay people off, and we never stopped tithing to the Lord. We just kept on giving the Lord no matter what. We had to. Anyway, God is faithful. If there's a delay in your answer, a delay in your prayers, keep being faithful. Keep being faithful. Keep believing. Keep declaring in prayer. God is faithful. He will come through for you.
Amen. Thank you, Keith. We appreciate that so much. Thank you, Lord, for your faithfulness. Don, would you come on up here? Don, thanks so much. We met Dawn for the first time at Block Party this year, and I think you've been coming ever since.
Yes.
Yep. So I'm going to give this mic to you. Are you ready? All right.
All right. So, our story's a little different. I grew up in the Catholic Church, and in 2016, I took my older children along with me for the ride of a lifetime. I married somebody that I had known since high school. Beginning of 2019, I lost my dad. 6 weeks to the day later, my mom went from a broken heart. Those were my support system. A month and a half after that, my kids watched me get my teeth knocked out in front of them. Fast forward a few years, I had Cooper. Naively, I thought things would get better, and they didn't. My children watched me get choked. My 12-year-old daughter tried to pull him off of me. I showed up in Oregon in August of 2024, got off a plane in Portland, and made it to Dallas. A couple weeks after I got into the shelter at Dallas, I believe I met Glenda when I went into Bambinos. I can tell you right now, at that point in time, I was still very scared. I knew my kids were safe. I knew I was safe. But I also knew there was something still missing. The Catholic Church told me, even with my situation, that unless I was willing to pay like $4,500 for an annulment for my marriage, I wasn't welcome to communion. So I felt like everybody had turned on me. I'd lost God, I'd lost everything. I blamed myself. And then we went to the block party. And things started to look a little brighter. And Michaela and Cooper and I started coming here. And then I struggled with the fact that my oldest was at a point where he didn't believe in God so much anymore. Like, he had witnessed a lot, he'd had a lot done to him, and he thought, how could there be a God if they let him go through that? I learned very quickly that I had gone through numerous times, I can remember telling you, where I had given up. And I had sat there and cried and thought to myself that I didn't want to keep going. My kids would be better off if I was gone because they wouldn't have to watch the arguing. And looking back now, I know that that was my unanswered prayer. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for my kids. So I started putting more faith in God. And I started realizing that I couldn't expect God to do everything for me. I had to give up my compromise. I had to let go of someone that I thought I loved, someone that I thought loved me, someone that was keeping me away from my full connection with God. 2 weeks ago, I got my divorce order finalized. I have sole custody. I do have to listen to him 15 minutes on the phone every week for Cooper to talk to him. But Cooper's getting enough jabs in there for me that, I'm kind of enjoying that part. But looking back over my entire year, the struggles and everything, I think one of the stories that stands out to me the most is the prodigal son. Just because when I learned to let go of what was holding me back and to let God in, he came full force. He even brought my oldest back to me. And he has opened his eyes again, and I thought Chris was going to hold out on me forever, and that was a really big struggle for me. But once we got him in here, he jumped in feet first, and he hasn't slowed down since. And I can honestly say, between Glenda and the church and everything, like me and my kids have found our safe harbor here, and it's not just the community that we're in, the place that we live, with everything happening and us moving again, yay. CLC has been a big part of our safe harbor, and I thank you guys for that. But I thank all of you, because I've grown to used to seeing the same faces every Sunday. And the one time that we had to miss, it wasn't fun for me. But you guys have become a big part, and you've helped me open that connection up with God again. And things are going great now. So thank you.
Thank you, Dad. I appreciate you. Thank you. Talk about the faithfulness of God. Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing, Don. Matt and Holly, would you come on up here and join us, please? And isn't it cool when we get to hear the family stories and we get to hear about what God's been doing?
Okay. Back in 2010, in the early part of 2010, Matt and I were living in Taiwan. We had lived there for 4 years. We had an incredible time there. We call it BK, before kids. And during that time, we knew in the spring that we were going to have to leave. You make transitions in international schools quite early in the year. We knew we were leaving to come back. And so for part of it, Matt was going to continue school and finish up some degree work when we got back. And I work as a teacher, and I was like, I'll just apply for jobs, no problem. Plenty of early start for that, so started applying for jobs way back in March of that year. Applied for jobs, and went all the way up. I applied for well over 100 teaching jobs that particular year, just thinking, like, I had taught for 5 years, I had a lot of experiences, should be no problem, and nothing turned up. Finally, in August, which of course, is like nobody wants to wait till August as a teacher to find out whether or not they're gonna have a job for the school year. I got an interview for a job, and it was perfect. It was gonna be doing instructional coaching, helping out with teachers, and I just thought, this is perfect. I can't believe this. I'm absolutely the right candidate for this job. Went to the job interview full of confidence, and didn't hear back from them at all. And I was so disappointed. I just remember that feeling like Matt was going to be starting school. We have no jobs, none of us lined up. We just made this giant transition back from living in another country, and just like thinking, okay, just got to trust God in this, that something's going to come along. I can sub, I can do whatever. We'll figure it out. Like a week before school starts, I went in for a job interview. It was for a half-time position. And I thought, whatever, I'll do this interview. Half-time's better than nothing, better than no time. Interviewed for it. And the very next day, found out that was the job I got. I got the half-time job. And I thought, okay, that's all right, we'll live with it. And then that same week, I found out I was pregnant with Grace. And so as it turned out, the half-time job was the exact job that I needed for that transition back for it. And so, yeah, we had a very busy year at that. And then, because God wasn't done yet, we got in that 2010, 2011, that was kind of post-recession stuff that had happened. And so the way schools are funded, it had an impact on the next biennium. So I was gone. Grace was born in May. I was gone on maternity leave only 2 weeks. I was only out for 2 weeks with her. And then got a phone call from my principal saying, so sorry, there is no job for you next year because we're cutting everybody in the first 3 years of their time in the school district. Spent all of that summer thinking, here we are, back to what we did last summer. No jobs lined up, still finishing up some things, making transitions and things like that. And now we have a baby. So the whole new adventure. And then so September of 2011, like the day before school was supposed to start, I got a call to go teach kindergarten, which I had never taught ever before. And it turned out I can just see God's hand in all of that in my career, because I would have never said, maybe it turned out I ended up, because of budget and the way things work, when you get RIFT, that you continue to get invited back as when positions open up. So for 4 years in a row, I got invited back to 4 different schools, 4 different grade levels, 4 different staffs, and everything like that. I continue to see God's hand in that, even though it was hard at the time, just seeing where he trained me for all sorts of different experiences. He trained me for different things. And through that, it's how I ended up knowing the people I know and getting to come back and work where I work now. And I just feel so grateful for that not straight pathway to where I ended up here today as a teacher and getting to do what I need to do. And Matt has, similar in the job world.
Yeah, I just wanted to share briefly about just another job transition as well. We're thankful that we don't just have one half-time job now. But there was a point 2 springs ago where I had stepped down from 2 different part-time ministry roles and just kind of cleared the slate leading up into summer. We had an anniversary trip, which was amazing. Ask us about it later. But heading into summer, I really had no idea of what I was going to do next. And that was the first time in a while that had been the case. Okay, we're going to leave this into God's hands and pray about it and see where God leads. And we got back from our trip, and it was about 2 weeks later, I got an email with a contact that I had doing warming centers and helping with those who are unsheltered here in Polk County. And she reached out and said, hey, do you know anyone who might be interested in being a chaplain for an organization called Church of the Park? And I thought about it for a couple of minutes, and I wrote back, actually, I might be interested in in this position. Had an interview the next day at 4 o'clock, and that has turned into the role that I am in today, full-time with Church of the Park, helping with the shelter here in Monmouth and in Dallas. It's been such a life-giving experience being part of this organization. I feel like it helped heal and has been helping to heal some things in me that I needed to work through, that God needed to work on me about, and had no idea leading into that summer that that's where I would be later that year, and just what God has done since then. So I want to encourage you that when you might be in a season where you don't know what's next, God does, and God knows that better than you ever will. And God will provide that thing. We may not know, it may not be in 2 weeks. The timeline might be different, but God does have that next thing for you, and God will provide that. And will provide it probably better, certainly better, than you can anticipate, because God is good, and he gives good gifts to his children. So.
Thank you guys. Man, isn't that encouraging? It's just like, wow, God's faithfulness, right? It's just all over the place. I'm just so inspired. Thank you for sharing. And finally tonight, I've got Glenda here who's going to come up and share something a little miraculous that transpired here this year.
Thank you, Pastor Stephen. I brought notes because the timeline is just kind of crazy. So A little background. I was on the board for Bambino starting in 2017. And we were so tiny. We were just such a small little ministry. We were just like a hole in the wall kind of office. I knew our budget, and it was sad. It was like $14,000 total in our bank account. It was supposed to last us the whole year. But we were small, and it worked. In 2019, I took over directorship. And in 2020, COVID hit everybody really hard, including our community. And we started just seeing this boom of people that needed us. And so our clientele doubled in 2021. It grew 100%, 100% again in 22, 70% in 2023, 100% again in 2024. So that's where we were like, okay, the Lord's really wanting us to convert this school bus that we have that's been parked in our driveway for 5 years and turn it into an office for Bambino so we can go out and do more. What we did not foresee was that God, of course, not a surprise to God, the ministry needs would quadruple, grow by 400% in 2025. And so, and like our bus project, even though we had grants for it and everything, a lot of our estimates, as contractors know, can sometimes come in way under. And so we pulled the trigger on a lot of these jobs and then found out actually, no, that's double. And we were already committed. And so all of our savings was completely drained. And I was trying not to panic as the leader of this sweet little organization that was growing and growing and growing. And I felt completely underwater as a leader and feeling completely ill-equipped to lead this ministry. And a grant came through for me to take classes through OSU for nonprofit directorship. And so I took those, and of course every class I needed was right when I needed it, but it was like more and more and more just confirming you are completely out of your depth in this job. And you have no idea what you're doing, and the textbooks prove it. And there were so many moments where I would learn something that we should be doing, and I just wanted to fall flat on my face to God and thank Him for protecting us from what I didn't know. And one of those was, you should have 3 to 6 months worth of expenses in a bank account separate for this ministry, or else it's going to go under. And we did not have that, not even close to that. And, on grants, they don't want to give you money if you're not sustainable. And by miracles of God, we kept getting grants, but I just knew, it just felt like there was just this cloud, like this heaviness of like, this is not going to last long. What are you going to do, Lord? Are we going to have to shut our doors and just go on the road? Is that why we have a bus? Is so we can shrink because I can't manage this? Just a whole lot of imposter syndrome. But my failures, God knew all of that when He asked me to take this job. He knew I didn't have the education for it. He knew that I would be so dependent on Him, I would have no choice but to just ask Him over and over and over again to provide, to educate me, to show me what to do. In fact, I remember one time driving to Salem in the dark and hearing a commercial for Corbin for nonprofit directorship and going, I need to go to school for that. And the Lord saying, I'll teach it myself. And boy, has He. And so that was way, way before. So here we are, fast forward to this year, and our monthly expenses are $11,000 a month, which is not huge when you look at how many babies we're able to help, but it's huge to me. Like, that's a huge number. So I knew that we had to somehow raise between $33,000 and $66,000 to have that bank account, that cushion that we're supposed to have to be a responsible ministry. Not like, just swimming in the dollars, but just so that if we had a rainy day, it was there. So I got a call from Salem First Baptist Church, and they have been letting us park our bus there one day a month. And they said, hey, we really want you to come and meet the church board. We have a little gift for you for Christmas. We took a collection. I was like, okay. They were like, can you come at 9:30 in the morning, the day before Christmas Eve? And I was like, I have to make 3 round trips to Salem that day. But yes, I will come. So I go in, and they wanted to hear the whole story of Bambinos and what the Lord is doing. And the pastor said, Mother Teresa says that raindrops are what make a lake. And he said, this is small, but we want to give you this gift and are specifically praying that this raindrop will grow into a lake for you. And so I was like, okay. So they hand me the check, and you're sitting there like, do I open it? Do I wait till I'm in the car? What do I? And there's like, you should open it. And I said, okay. So I open it, and it was $20,000. And I lost every cool that I possibly could have had, ugly crying. I was like, this is not small. This is not a raindrop. And just completely lost it. And they all lost it. And, we were all crying and talking about the faithfulness of God. And I said to the main pastor, I said, when God tapped me to take this role, he made it very clear he wanted me to run it like George Mueller would run it. And for those of you who don't know who that is, he ran orphanages in the poorest part of London in the 1800s. Right around the time, when you read anything Dickens, he was basing those books on the bad side of orphanages and workhouses. And George Mueller felt called to do it very differently, and to trust the care of orphans to God's care, and to trust him for all their money and their needs. And one particular morning, so I told the pastor this, and I said, I feel like the Lord has asked me to run this like George Mueller, and I've always felt like I can't possibly do that. And then things like this happen. And he said, oh, so you're saying that the bread truck and the milk truck broke down in front of your orphanage today? And I said, yes. And so real briefly, the story is there was a bunch of orphans gathered in the dining hall. He knew he had zero food for them, zero money to feed them. And he called them down from breakfast and to breakfast and had them sit at empty tables and thank God for their meal. He had no idea how he was going to feed those children in 5 minutes. It just blows my mind, the amount of faith that he had. And so all the kids, with faith, thanked God for their meal. And then they hear a knock on the door, and a baker comes to the door and says, God woke me up at 3 a.m. to make you breakfast this morning. And so here's all this bread for the children. And then while that was happening, a milk carriage broke down, horse went lame, and he said, there's no way I can deliver all this milk to my customers. It's going to go bad. So here's milk for the children. And just story after story like that, when I was reading his biography, it's like, okay, I just have to trust God for provision. And I cannot... we do not work out on paper, you guys. Bambinos has never worked out on paper, and it is not duplicatable. And, every time someone says, why are you going to grow and expand and go into other counties? I'm like, I don't think anyone finds this appealing, like at all, to run ministry this way. But I cried from Salem to Brick Real, like you do when you just got a $20,000 check. And I get a call from our building owner. The story doesn't end. There's like 3 miracles in one day, so just to brace yourselves. So I talked to our building manager, who said, hey, we want to change your lease from 1 year to 3 years. Are you okay with us extending it that long? We really feel like it's more appealing. We're trying to sell this building. And I said, okay. And he said, your rent's going to go up considerably because you're way under market value, which we knew. But we're still going to pay your utilities. And so, overnight, our rent goes up $350 a month, which doesn't seem like a lot for a big building, but for us it is. And I was like, okay, Lord, you gave us that $20,000 so I could sign that contract, so I would have peace that at least we've got that. And while I'm on the phone with this management company, I get a call from my treasurer, and then she hangs up, and then she tries to call me again and hangs up, and I'm like, what is going on? So I call her back, and she says, are you sitting down? And I said, yes. And she said, I just got off the phone with so-and-so, I'm not going to reveal their identity, but they're faithful, generous givers. They'll give us a couple $1,000s at the end of every year, which is huge to us. And she said, they decided they're going to write us a check for $50,000 this year. 50, like 50? 550. And I'm sitting here, and the pastor at Salem First Baptist said, there's so often that like we get an offering, and it's like down to the penny, like for a project that you had in mind. What was your project that you have in mind? I'm like, staying open? I was not cool at all, you guys. It was ridiculous. But, and then when you add this, like our biggest need, our high-end need was $66,000. And God surpassed that because that's what he does. He takes good care of us. And I can hardly wait to just look at the budget and go, oh, we don't have a shortfall already. We were actually, we had just got off the phone. I was on my way to Salem when I was talking to our treasurer, and we were debating on whether or not we could buy the diapers to get us through the rest of the month, because it would bring our bank account down to $1,200, savings, checking, everything. And that's a scary place to be. But, as a lot of these testimonies, the stories took us several years to tell, right? Like it starts in 2017 or 2019 or 2011. And a lot of times I think we get so focused at what's right in front of us that we forget the faithfulness of God. And if we look over the course of our lives, when you're reading through the Old Testament, you see all these genealogies and there's a name, and all you get is that name. And you have no idea there's a whole life that was lived of God's faithfulness just with that one name. And, we all may just be blips on the radar, years and years down the road, but we all have stories that are a lifetime of God's faithfulness, and he will not let us down. We may not have a surplus, we may not have everything we've ever wanted, but we will always have enough, and we will always have what we need. And we can depend on him even when we feel like there's just nothing. There's nothing left. I have nothing left to give. But that's when he goes, oh, but, look at what I did in 2 hours, Glenda, what you've been beating your head against a wall all year to do. And that's raise, half of your year's needs in one day. God is so faithful, and he will be faithful to you. Whatever your need is, it doesn't have to be monetary, but he will be faithful, so.
Okay. Well, we're gonna conclude in song here this evening. But isn't it powerful? I hope that what you're hearing tonight, and Glenda just did such a beautiful job. We need to get her communicating more often. But she did such a beautiful job of reminding us of how something that God has started in our lives, and even if we have let it die out, or if we feel like we have failed, He's still on track. He's still working that plan out. And time and time again, that happens. So don't be discouraged if you didn't finish all your goals for 2025. Because guess what? There's 2026. I know that we don't know. We have to be thankful for the day that we're living in. We're not promised tomorrow. But the reality is that so often, just like Linda said, so often we are so small-minded in our thinking. And we need to realize God's looking at a big picture, right? But will you stand with me this evening? And hopefully what you heard here tonight is that we serve a faithful God. Whether it's finances, whether it's a job, whether it's the restoration and the reconciliation of your life and of your family, whatever it would be, I hope that you heard tonight that God is faithful. And the reason we do this from time to time is because you and I need to be reminded that we don't just serve a God that we read about in Scripture. We serve a God that is alive and well today. And God is faithfully working in your life. He's faithfully working in your family. He's faithfully working with you on your campus. He's faithfully a part of everything that's going on in your world today. And hopefully you can walk away from tonight and acknowledge that God is faithful. So church, let's sing this song here together. Would you lead us?